thank you all for coming to this event. It might have been short notice for some of you. So my name is Deva, and as Mr. Ramurthy said, I was born in Chennai, Madras then, grew up in Bangalore, then came back to Madras, then went and did my engineering in Vellore, and then after that decided worked for a year, and I'll link it back to what I'm going to be talking about today. And then decided to study more, ended up going to the United States. Then for a change of scenario, after finishing my PhD, went to Belgium, then went back to the US, and then as of last month, I have moved back to France. But again, so in terms of how I got into sales, and I guess if I look at the audience, and unfortunately I cannot get to know each and every one of you, but hopefully we'll have a chance to meet either virtually or on LinkedIn moving forward. But I got into sales was more by accident. So when I was finishing up my engineering, and then I was looking for a job, and essentially there was a company which is still there. It's a German company, but they had an Indian subsidiary based out of Pune, Pimpri and Chinchwad exactly. It was a company called KSB, and they were looking for sales engineers. So it is not that I was trained to be an engineer, but trained to be a sales person. But again, at the end of the day, I just ended up into sales, fell in love with the idea of sales. And I'm sure that if I take a look at all of you who have signed on to this particular webinar, also are people who might have stumbled on into sales. Not that sales was your first career choice. For those of you who said sales was your first career choice, fantastic. For others, it's just something that you kind of gravitated or moved into. And that is very important because in India, and I guess things are changing now because I know that there are a couple of faculty members, professors in IIM Kozhikode, IMT Ghaziabad, and other places as well, where they're focusing a lot on bringing sales education. But to a large extent, sales education is still restricted to what companies will provide you once you join them. So which means that sales is still not seen as something that we need to be teaching youngsters, or in some cases, sales is still not seen as an attractive career choice. And I always tell them that when I talk to young students in different parts of the world, it's just not in India, in almost every part of the world except the United States, sales is still seen as something that is very vocational, something that you have to learn on the job. You don't need to be taught that as well. But what you will see is that in the space of business to business, in industrial sales, and every other kind of situation where we have to talk to multiple people, sales is becoming a lot more professional because your customers are becoming more, and we need to start looking at sales as a skill set that we need to provide. Now, the interesting thing is, the very thing that makes sales so easy to understand also makes it also more complex is the fact that a lot of things that we do in life, we are actually in the sales process ourselves without realizing it. And to help understand that, we need to understand that sales is about persuasion. It is not about making a sale or making some rupees or selling a product. It is about selling your idea, selling your vision that what you have to sell is going to help the person in front of you. And I always joke that as a salesperson, my biggest sale was convincing my wife to say yes to me instead of all the other people out there who she could have chosen from as well. My wife is from France, but she had the opportunity to go out with every other human being out there, every other male out there in France or any other place, but she chose to go with me. So for most of us, we are in the aspect of persuasion. And if you look at sales as persuasion, then the things that we do in life can also be translated into sales as well. But therein lies the problem. People think that if you're good in personal situations, you're also going to be good in sales. Yes, you might have the advantage, but it does not necessarily mean that you're always going to be good. So what I'm going to share with you, and this was actually a very difficult task, saying something in 40, 45 minutes to still give time for Q&A. especially considering the fact that from July 13th that I will be doing an 8-session course. So we don't want to give too much away from the course, but we want to give you a teaser for what is out there as well. So I'm going to share with you some insights. And then the topic which was suggested was sales skills are life skills. So the presentation that I'm going to share with you right now has been emailed to AMA, and they will be emailing it to all the participants either right now or after the session. One more request to all of you. If you have questions, please hold on to your questions or put it in the chat button on the right-hand side corner, so that once the session is over, I can go back. Once my presentation is over, I can go back and then try to answer your questions as well. So hopefully you're all able to hear me well, and let me go ahead and start my presentation. So now let's see. So the topic that was given to me are sales skills or life skills. And as I said earlier, is that if you look at sales as not just about a buyer and a customer, but more from the viewpoint of a person who's trying to persuade the person in front of them, then almost every situation can be a sales situation. You could be an entrepreneur and you might want to convince your first customer to buy into your idea, or you might want to consider, you might want to kind of pitch your idea to a venture capitalist who might want to be investing, or you might be in the business where you want to convince your first employee to leave their jobs to come and join you. Even there, you might not realize it, but you're in the sales part of it as well. And essentially, that's what we talk about sales skills or life skills. So when we talk about the art of persuasion, and this is one of my favorite quotations. It was made by a professor from a business school called Harvard, and he famously said, "No customer wants a quarter-inch drill. What they want is a quarter-inch hole." In sales, essentially, the temptation always for us is to talk about ourselves or our products. Unfortunately, in today's day and age, that is not always going to work, because it is not about what we have to sell. It's about what will our product do for the customers. So essentially, if I am focusing myself only on what I can do instead of what I can do to help the customer, you are never going to be in the business of persuading. And that's true in every situation. Every time you want to go negotiate with your boss, you might always not just talk about what a great person you are, but how you are going to help your boss look good. How are you going to help them achieve that? And that's pretty much the same in every aspect of life as it is in sales. So the key to all this is, if I want to persuade somebody, it is not about myself. It is about knowing what I can offer, but knowing how what I have to offer is going to help the customer. And that is something that was very famously put together. It's a very simple context. It's a very simple thing. But if you go back and think about all the conversations that you have with your customer, ask yourself, how much time do you spend listening to the customers and customizing your presentation, rather than going with a standard presentation and presenting it to everyone, right? So essentially what it means is that I firmly believe, and this is my thought on it, of course, you may disagree, but I think that just as in life, we are in the process of keeping other people around us happy. So which means that in a sales context, we should be creating value to the different people that we come in contact with. And your ability to create that value is what is going to help you be successful, not just in getting the sale or getting what you want, but most importantly, when you make that sale, you have a person who is connected to you, or you have a customer who, once they buy your product, is going to pay the right kind of price and is going to continue working with you, is then going to become a positive advocate who says good things about you in the market. Essentially, you are not just creating value for the customer, but you actually also create value either for yourself as well as for the company that you work for. If you happen to be an entrepreneur, you create value for the customer, who in turn creates value for you. So as salespeople, you truly are in the middle where you have to take care of your customers, but you also have to take care of your company. And that is very, very important. And that is, again, something that I find myself saying to a lot of companies, that if you try and take a look at sales, we need to be looking at creating value for the customers as well as value for your own organization. Sorry about that. My daughter was just one second. Sorry, my daughter is busy. Sorry. So which means that, again, my apologies for that. So essentially, which means that salespeople, as I said earlier, need to be talking about how should I be creating value for the customer, so that when I create value for the customer is going to repay that back to us by either giving us business, by paying the right price, or by being in a long-term relationship with us, which again is what you might refer to as loyalty. And when you have a loyal customer base, then it also means that you are creating value from the customer to yourself. There is a value of the customer. And as a salesperson, you have to realize that we have to create value for all the parties that we come in with, including ourselves as well. And that is very, very true, because if you are not creating value for the customer and the customer does not give you business, your company is also not necessarily going to be doing well. And if your company is not doing well, you will not be doing well yourself. So this idea of managing different stakeholders is very critical. And that's something that you do in your personal life as well, right? Think of all your friends, your relatives, your family, and all of them, and your business partners, and how you try to juggle this and how you try to create the meaning of your existence. It's pretty much what you do in sales as well. And this is something that I wish I was taught when I was young, but that is something that I had to learn on the job with this idea. And this is one key takeaway that I want you to always remember here. The value that I create for my customers, value is benefits over price, right? Benefits is what the customer wants. What is the customer looking for? Why is the customer even coming to you with a problem that they might have or a solution that they want an answer for? What the customer is looking for. And essentially, what you have to do is your job is, if I need to tell the customer why my product is going to be the best for them, I have to understand, well, what is the need of the customer? And then how do I combine the need of the customer with what is my offering? What is my product? What is my service that I can provide? And it is that combination of what the customer has with what you have as a company, which creates the benefits. Now, when I am creating the benefits for the customer, I should also make sure that the customer is getting a lot, but I should also make sure that I should price and ask for the right price, because for all the benefits, the customer has to pay a particular price. Think about anything that you purchased recently. You, of course, saw the benefits of buying it, but you had to pay for it as well. Similarly, it's the same way. Your job as a salesperson, as much as possible, is to keep this value equation to around value of one. That is, the benefits that the customer gets should match the price the customer has to pay. And a lot of times, the question that I always get is that, well, is it just the price? Well, no, it's not necessarily just the price. It could be benefits. And what is the cost of securing those benefits for the customer? So the price is indicative of what are all the things that the customer has to do. And if you take part in the program, we'll spend a little bit more time on the concept of total cost of ownership, that talks about what will it cost the customer to have access to your products and services, and how understanding this is critical, because every time I'm trying to create value, the customer is going to be doing a trade-off between what am I going to get and what is the price or what is the cost I have to pay to get those benefits. And your job, as much as possible, is to make sure that the customer's perceptions of feelings of benefits they're going to get matches the price. Now, I know that a lot of times in India and in certain parts of the world, the tendency is for the customers to try to increase the value by trying to lower the price. And the problem just giving in to lowering the price, unfortunately, is that the customer is going to keep asking you repeatedly again and again for lowering the price. So the whole idea is, the whole way of handling the situation is, if the customer tries to drive you on price, you try to focus on what benefits, which again means that you should be spending a lot of time trying to identify the needs of the customers. Now, this is where usually people say that a good salesperson is born. And yes, there are certain aspects of people being outgoing that will help them, but I'm a firm believer that salespeople are made, mostly because if you train a good person to ask the right questions and listen to the customers before you respond, you're more likely to be successful because you are paying attention to what the customers want. If you're very, very good in conversation without listening to the customers, you might get a sale once, but you will not necessarily always get the sale. Those days are gone. Those days where if you're a smooth talker, if you're very, very good at talking without listening, your customers are not always going to come back to you again and again, because it could be that you sell them something that either they did not have a need for, or something that you're not able to actually fulfill their requirements. Again, I'm mostly talking about business to business sales, where we want to have long-term relationships with the customers. And this one is what I have learned over around 19 years of teaching. Mohammed, I see that, Mr. Rakib, I see that you have raised your hand. It would be great, in the interest of time, if you could just type in your question in the chat button, and I promise I'll come back to you and answer your question as well, if that's okay with you. So please do apologize in the interest of time only. So thank you for that. So in the elements of the sales process, and this is again something that we do in our daily life. The first thing is, when you go talk to somebody, why should a customer listen to you? What is it that you're going to be doing for them that they think is going to create value for them? That's the first thing. And I had to learn that in my personal life as well. Why did my wife even have to talk to me first? She could have talked to anybody else. The next thing is, if I want my customer to listen to me, I should be focusing everything that I do on trying to understand what are the needs of the customer and how am I going to sell to them. So which means that I should be focusing on who should I be talking to in the customer's organization. It could be very well that in some cases, my wife, in my instances, my wife is of Chinese and Cambodian origin. So which means that, yes, I could convince her, but I also have to convince her parents, which is typically true even in Asian families, which means that we should also know that in the case of complex situations, you don't have to just talk to one, you might have to talk to multiple people whose needs have to be fulfilled to get your idea across. Now, of course, once I know who are the different people, then I should ask myself, where should I be creating value for my customers? It's not, for some customers, it could be in the early stage where you provide them with the information that helps them make the right decision. Or in some cases, you could be helping them through the buying process, where you constantly provide information to them so that it makes it easier for the customers to make the right decision. Or in many cases, you create value in different stages of the customer's journey. We'll talk a little bit about that today, but we'll talk a lot more about that in the program if you do choose. Even if you choose not to do the program, some of the concepts that I say, you can actually go to YouTube and download a lot of videos that talk about some of the concepts that I'm talking about, right? And then once I know where I create value for my customers, and this is pretty much where now it is up to the salesperson to start explaining to the customer why the customer should choose me over the competition. That is what we refer to as a value proposition. That is what is so unique about me as a salesperson and my company and our offering that is going to differentiate you from the competition as well. Then, of course, once we have this, there's always the execution part of it, which is how am I going to go through the process as well, right? So the first one, why should the customer listen to you? A lot of times, I always hear frustrated salespeople ask me, we go to a customer with a very nice, cool idea, and the customer says, we are not ready for it, or what you are asking to buy from you will require a lot of change from us. And one of the first things you really have to understand as a salesperson, be it in real life as well as in a business setting, is customers are always lazy. They do not want to change what has been working all the time and everything else, unless there's a big problem. So this is something that I heard from one of the sales managers I interviewed for my research, and he said, you should always, as a salesperson, make the customer realize that the pain of same, that is the pain of not doing anything, is going to be greater than the pain of change. That is, you might say, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to shake anything because things are going well, but you know that there is going to be a problem. In that case, it is your job as a salesperson to tell the customer that it looks like if you don't do anything, things are okay now, and you don't want to make that painful change decision. But understand that if you continue doing this right now, in moving forward, you are going to face the consequences of not making the change because you are too afraid that if I make the change now, it's going to be very painful within my company. So it is your job to educate the customers. And in some cases, I educating the customer is in the case where the customer might not even realize that they have a problem. There are situations right now, and I'll come to it a little bit later on, where the customers already think they know what they want. In that case, it is your job to try as much as possible to consciously make the customer unlearn what they already know. Is even making them realize that what they know might not be appropriate for their situation. And that's not an easy task. And not paying attention to the customer, but just talking one way is not going to help you. So the first thing is, we need to make the customer understand why they should even give us the time to talk to us. A lot of times, I'm sure if you're in sales, you've had situations where you've reached out to a customer and the customer says, I don't have time now, or this is not the right time for us. And the idea there is that you have to slowly chip away at the customer and try to find out how you can make the customer realize that now is the right time for the customer to listen to you, because if they don't do it now, because they're afraid to change, moving forward, it's going to be a lot more painful for the customer. And that is a persuasive argument that you really need to do as well. And then, of course, I'm just giving you an example of a company is what happens when we go in a business to business situation is when I go to sell, I'm not selling to one person, I'm selling to multiple people in the customer's organization. So this could be a top manager, this could be like a CEO, chief executive officer. This is purchasing. So if anybody here is from purchasing, my apologies. But then you could be talking to the folks from R&D, research and development. You could be dealing with people who are in the production space, production managers and things like that. And you could be dealing with the actual people who are using your particular product. But what you need to understand is that before you get your product or service into the hands of this person who uses it, you will have to try and make sure that you also have to fulfill everybody's requirements. And again, what you see here is the following. You will see that every individual that you talk to is going to have a different set of needs. When you have the chance to look at the PowerPoint deck that I've sent you, you will see that everybody has a different set of requirements. And you have to understand this and be able to convince them as well. A lot of times, you might think that I just need to talk to these 2 or 3 people who might be the people with the money to buy a product, but a lot of times they could be heavily influenced by the person who actually uses your product. And if the person who uses the product does not like your product, even though you can convince these 3, you will not be able to proceed further in the sale. Again, the same thing. So for example, in the case of my wife, yes, it was my wife who was very important, but at the end of the day, is her grandmother was extremely important for me to convince that she needs to spend more time with me as well. Again, the idea is that you need to talk to multiple stakeholders, and that is again where you do it in life as well. Which means that if I need to understand, I also need to understand if I have different people here, where do the different people get involved? And this is typically a customer journey where the customer initially becomes aware that they might have a problem. Then they might show an interest in listening to possible solutions. Then they will look into which kind of suppliers should I be working with. Then they will go into the evaluation of the different suppliers because they ask for proposals and they get that. And then, of course, there is always the final decision purchase. Now, of course, these days, there is also something which has got to do with post-purchase, which has got to do with what happens after purchase. Now, what you'll see is that, as you see, there are different stakeholders, and not everybody might be involved in the awareness stage. So it could be that if you go back here, when they have a problem, it could just be these two people who are aware that they have a problem. They might be looking for solutions. And then they might say, okay, once we have the solution, then we're going to involve procurement or purchasing to see who should I consider. And then once they do the consideration, then of course, there's going to be an evaluation, which now is not just these two people, but these could be two people could be doing the technical aspect and the others could be looking at the commercial aspect of things. And then the purchaser could come in. So you see that in the customer's buying journey, there could be different points in time where, as a salesperson, I need to come in and try to create value as well. 1 hour is too short for me to go into depth in each of these, but that's what we'll be doing in the program later on as well. Now, if I do all this, the next thing for me is how do I create all this? If I've understood who are my different stakeholders in the customer's organization, if I understand based on this, where should I be creating value? The next thing is, of course, how do I communicate this as well? And you would have heard the term value propositions. Now, value propositions are not something where you talk about what is my company and what does my company do. That is a mission statement. A lot of times I have salespeople come in and say, oh, our value proposition is just we are a great company and we do this. That's the mission statement. That is not relevant to the customer. What we have to do is we have to start asking ourselves, how do I create a set of sentences that tells the customer precisely what they will get when they work from us, and how are we different from the competition? And that is typically a value proposition that is usually a marketing tool that should be opening the doors for salespeople, typically made by marketing managers, product managers, business line managers, or business unit managers, and sales managers all working together, and you try to do it per customer segment. Where is the salesperson's role coming in here? The salesperson's role is much more here, where when I create a value proposition for my segment or for my market, I do it based on my individual contacts with customers in. So what we're talking about is, if as a company, I need to have a good value proposition, I need to have a USP, unique selling proposition, that is typically done at the customer level, where as a salesperson, I understand the needs of the customers and then deliver this particular USP, which of course, if I do it repeatedly, then if I have a good relationship with my sales manager and the marketing, it gets picked up and you have good value propositions. Again, very, very important for salespeople here as well. So if these are some of the concepts, so the concepts are, I should know why I should convince the customer that they should listen to me now. That's the why. Who should I be talking to in the customer's organization, realizing that there are different people? Then I should understand that different people are going to get involved in different stages of the customer journey. So I should know where I should be creating value. The fourth point is, once I understand this, how am I going to communicate to them why they should continue working with us? What is so unique about us? Of course, if I do all this, how am I going to execute this? And here, to understand what is happening is, if I want to execute this as a salesperson, I also need to understand what is happening in the world of business today. I do understand that some of the numbers I have here are based on a global sample of leaders. So it could be that in India, some of the numbers I showed you here could be different. But essentially what is happening in the B2B, the business to business space, is, as a salesperson, what am I dealing with? I am dealing with my customers who do not look at me as a salesperson as the first point of getting information from. 89% of my customers increasingly are going to be using internet to do research. They are going to be using Google to do research. They at least do 12 searches on Google before they engage with a brand. On top of this, it's not just Google on PowerPoint, it could also be on mobile devices. So based on this, essentially what happens is that 57% of a customer's buying decision is made before they talk to a sales rep, which is a huge thing, because you need to understand that from the viewpoint of salespeople, that if my customer has already made up their mind, it's going to be very hard for me to convince them if they have decided to work with the competition. So you have to ask yourself, how do I get rid of this? And the answer, of course, is I want to go early and early in the process when the customer has not made up their mind. But the problem is you're only one salesperson. And if you go early and early in the sales and the buying process, you're still not guaranteed a sale. So again, you have that issue there as well. So again, asking yourself, is sales the same as before, or should I be working more and more with marketing? Again, that's a question that you need to have. That's where the digital part of things come in. Then the next thing is, you see that 30% of big decisions are made by at least 5 members in the committee in the customer's organization, which means that I have to fulfill the requirements of all 5, as against 70% by 2 members, which means that again, the complexity of the sales process is becoming a lot more. Then, of course, there's going to be more and more now focus on e-commerce, where the customers, because of COVID as well, out there are trying to say, I can buy everything online. I don't necessarily need to talk to you as well. Of course, these are all numbers that I do not do myself. These are all from the companies that you might want to go and follow their blogs, because they have great content available there as well. Now, on top of it is, if you believe that if customers are doing their homework online, if they're doing information from your website, even before you have a chance to talk to them as a salesperson, then the question is, if they're going to my social media, if they're going to my company's website, what's happening is that 76% of customers say that they want information that is easily available on the website. They want that information personalized according to their role. So that if I'm a CEO, I don't want to see any kind of material. I just want to see how you have helped other CEOs just like them. And again, increasingly, social media is becoming very relevant, even in B2B sales. And especially with more and more people having access to social media, being active on different kinds of, what can I say, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and stuff like that, that it becomes more critical for you as a salesperson to be active there. Not that you're going to sell completely, but you will be able to influence and see what your customers are saying, either about what's happening in their business that you can use to sell, or what they are saying so that you can use it when you can actually talk to them. So which means then that what's happening today is, in the past, going back to the same journey I showed you of the customer, marketing was playing a vital role up to the point where the customer is looking for consideration and saying, where are the suppliers? And then the salesperson would try to go and convince the customer. What is happening is, because of advances in technology, and now especially because of COVID as well, you see that the customers are stuck at home, are not able to see the salespeople. So marketing is playing a very, very big role in the whole buyer's process. So which means that the salesperson is going from here to a very, very small portion, but a very, very critical part as well. So what I'm saying here might not be relevant to all of you, because some of you might be in very traditional industries where marketing is not done. But what we need to understand is that our customers are changing the way they are interacting with us, and we should be ready for it. And this, by the way, for some of you in the technology space, if you're working for SaaS companies, you know what I'm talking about. But this is the whole idea. It's called the demand waterfall. I am not going to spend way too much time talking about this, but all I want to say is increasingly in the past, when I was in sales, when I used to be in KSB, essentially I was responsible for doing a lot of cold calling. Cold calling is I would actually have to go do prospects, then qualify the prospects myself, and then try to go through the process. And I only had 10 hours in a day that I would work. So which means that I could not always work on everything. So now with customers changing their buying behaviors, what you see increasingly is when the customer, there are ways by which you can do inbound. So how can I use my websites, webinars, brochures, and again, social media presence to try and get leads inbound without involving the sales force. Or I could do email marketing. I could do all that marketing automation, which we'll discuss a little bit more in the program. 1 hour again is too short, to try to create leads. These are leads created by marketing, which is then qualified by marketing before it is handed over to sales. Sales parallelly will also be creating their own leads. And then you will go through the whole process and then trying to close the deal as well. So these are all the things already beginning to happen. Again, in your industry, maybe it's not there yet. It could be happening in some form or the other. But either way, the traditional ways of the way you were doing business before is not always going to be the same. And moving forward, you're going to have a younger set of people in the customer's buying organization, and they will be more technologically savvy than what your company is doing right now. And this is just to give you an idea. Some of you may not be aware. This is a very nice source called Vendor Neutral. If you get a chance, go take a look at it. These are all the technology companies out there today saying that they are a great source for salespeople in sales companies to use these technologies to be better in their job. So if you think that using CRM is difficult already, think about all the different technologies which are now available just to help the salesperson be good at their jobs. So again, technology, whether we like it or not, is shaping and radically shaping. It could be that in India, we still may be a little bit, what can I say, behind in terms of how technology is impacting. But trust me, from what I've seen is it might take a little bit longer to come to some places. But once it's there, it's going to ramp up very, very fast. So I just wanted to thank you all for that.